My name is Genevieve. I'm 27 and I teach third grade in Boston. For 2 years, I thought Nathan was the one, until he looked me in the eyes and said, I wasn't wife material. That hurt enough, but nothing prepared me for what happened just weeks later at our family BBQ when he got down on one knee in front of everyone and proposed to my sister. What happened next changed all our lives forever. Before I share my story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted. Trust me, what I did next is something you won't want to miss. I met Nathan 3 years ago at my best friend Mia's wedding. He was the best man, tall with dark hair, and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I was the maid of honor and we spent the entire reception talking. By the time the night ended, I had his number and butterflies in my stomach. Nathan was everything I thought I wanted. Successful investment banker at a prestigious firm in downtown Boston. Charming, well-spoken with a confidence that was magnetic. On our first date, he took me to an exclusive restaurant where he knew the chef personally. He ordered for both of us in perfect Italian and talked about his travels through Europe. I was impressed, maybe a little intimidated, but mostly swept off my feet. Our relationship moved quickly. Within 3 months, he was taking me to work functions, introducing me as his girlfriend to important colleagues. He was attentive in ways that made me feel special. He remembered little things. My favorite flowers were sunflowers, not roses, and he brought them on our third date. He knew I collected vintage bookmarks and would surprise me with unique ones he found. My sister Heather had reservations from the beginning. He seems too perfect, she said after meeting him the first time. Nobody is that put together without hiding something. I dismissed her concerns as jealousy. Heather had always been the prettier one, the one who turned heads when we walked into a room together. But I was the one who had found someone special this time, not her. Nathan gradually became part of our family. Sunday dinners at my parents' house became a regular thing. He charmed my mother with compliments about her cooking and won over my father by discussing sports and politics. My father had always wanted a son, and Nathan seemed to fill that role perfectly. Dad would light up whenever Nathan arrived, eager to show him his latest workshop project or discuss the stock market. As months turned into a year, and then 2, I started to hope Nathan might propose. He would make comments about our future together, mention houses and neighborhoods he thought we might like, ask my opinion on different engagement ring styles. For a friend at work, I started saving wedding ideas on Pinterest and imagining our life together. There were red flags looking back. Small moments that should have given me pause. Like how he would sometimes critique what I wore to events with his colleagues. Maybe something a little more sophisticated next time, but he'd suggest eyeing my floral dress. Or how he would check his phone constantly during our dates, explaining it away as work emergencies. How he would subtly compare me to ex-girlfriends who were more accomplished, one who was finishing medical school, another who ran her own business. But love has a way of blinding you to the obvious. I made excuses for him. He was busy. He was successful. He had high standards. Heather moved back home after finishing her master's degree in marketing. She was looking for a job and trying to save money before getting her own place. That's when the dynamic between the three of us began to shift in ways I didn't fully recognize at the time. Suddenly, Nathan was suggesting we include Heather in our plans. Movies, dinners, hiking trips. He wanted her there. I was touched by his thoughtfulness, happy that he wanted to bond with my family. Heather seemed resistant at first, but soon warmed to the idea. I noticed they shared a similar sense of humor, both quick with sarcastic comments that sometimes left me feeling like I was missing the joke. I remember one night after the three of us had dinner together, Nathan commented, "Your sister's going places, General. That marketing brain of hers is impressive." There was something in his tone that made me feel small, like I was being measured against Heather and coming up short. But I pushed the feeling aside. After all, why wouldn't he compliment my sister? It only showed what a good person he was. How wrong I was. How terribly painfully wrong. It happened on a Thursday night. Nathan had texted me earlier that day, asking to meet for dinner at Bellini's, the expensive Italian restaurant where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. I thought maybe this was it, the proposal I had been waiting for. I spent hours getting ready, choosing a blue dress he once said brought out my eyes, styling my hair the way he preferred. I arrived at the restaurant to find Nathan already seated, swirling a glass of red wine. He didn't stand when I approached the table. He didn't smile. My stomach dropped instantly, but I still took my seat, hoping I was overreacting. After perfunctory small talk about our days, Nathan set down his glass and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Detached. Clinical. Like I was a business problem he needed to solve. "Genevieve," he said, "I think we need to end this." The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Why I thought things were going well between us. "You're great," he said, reaching across the table to briefly touch my hand before withdrawing again. "You really are. You're kind and you're sweet, and any man would be lucky to have you." I heard the unspoken "but" hanging in the air between us. "But you're not wife material," he continued, confirming my fear. "Not for me, anyway." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. What does that even mean, not wife material? Nathan sighed, as if explaining this was tedious for him. "You're too emotional, Genevieve. You cry at commercials. You get upset when I have to cancel plans for work. That's not the kind of partner I need." He took another sip of his wine before continuing. "And let's be honest, you're not ambitious enough. Teaching is noble, but you have no desire to move up to be a principal or administrator. You're content just being in the classroom year after year." Each word was a cut, precise and painful. I sat frozen, unable to defend myself. "I need someone who fits into my world, my future plans. Someone who can network with clients, host dinner parties, be an asset to my career. You're just not that person." I don't remember much of what happened next. I know tears streamed down my face. I know I asked if there was someone else, and he denied it with such conviction that I believed him. I remember the pitying looks from nearby diners as I stumbled out of the restaurant alone, leaving Nathan to pay the bill for a meal I hadn't touched. The days that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. My friends rallied around me, of course. "He's an elitist jerk," said Zoe, my best friend since college. "You're better off without him." My other friends echoed similar sentiments, assuring me it was his loss, not mine. I went through the motions of a breakup. I boxed up his things from my apartment, the extra clothes he kept there, the expensive coffee machine he'd bought because he didn't like my simple drip brewer, the framed photo of us in Nantucket. I deleted our pictures from social media, removed him from my friends list, and erased his number from my phone, though I still knew it by heart. My family reacted as expected. My mother was sympathetic, bringing over homemade soup and sitting with me while I cried. My father was disappointed. I think he missed Nathan more than he was concerned about my broken heart. But it was Heather's reaction that should have alerted me that something was wrong. She wasn't supportive. Not really. She said all the right things. "He's a fool, and you deserve better." But there was something off about her delivery. She wouldn't meet my eyes when we talked about him. She changed the subject quickly whenever his name came up. And then there were the mysterious texts. Heather guarding her phone, angling the screen away when I entered the room. Her leaving the house at odd hours, coming back with vague explanations about meeting friends. I was too consumed by my own grief to connect the dots. I threw myself into healing. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in breakups and self-esteem. I focused on my students, staying late to create more engaging lesson plans. I reconnected with friends I had somewhat neglected during my relationship with Nathan. I was determined to prove him wrong, to show that being emotional was not a flaw, but a strength that made me a compassionate teacher, a loyal friend, a loving daughter. But despite my efforts to move forward, something inside me remained stuck on his words. Not wife material. What did that mean, really? Was I fundamentally flawed in some way, unworthy of being loved completely, permanently? These questions haunted me, keeping me awake at night, distracting me during the day. Little did I know the real answers would come in a way I could never have anticipated. About 3 weeks after the breakup, I began to notice changes in Heather. She was dressing differently, more sophisticated, less of her usual casual style. She started wearing makeup daily, though she'd always been a minimal makeup person before. She was constantly on her phone, smiling at texts, quickly locking the screen if I walked by. I might have attributed it to a new romantic interest, if not for what happened one Tuesday evening. I came home early from a staff meeting that had been canceled at the last minute. The house was quiet. My parents were at their weekly bridge game, and Heather had said she was going to the gym. I decided to take a long bath, something I rarely had time for. As I was gathering my things in the bathroom we shared, I noticed something on the counter near Heather's sink. A watch. A very familiar watch, with a distinctive blue face and brown leather band. The watch I had given Nathan for Christmas, saving for months to afford the brand he casually mentioned wanting. My hands shook as I picked it up. There had to be an explanation. Maybe Nathan had come by to return some of my things while I was out. Maybe he'd left it accidentally. When Heather came home an hour later, I confronted her, immediately holding up the watch. "Why is Nathan's watch in our bathroom?" Heather's face went pale, then flushed. "Oh, that. He stopped by earlier to return some books you'd left at his place. He must have set it down and forgotten it." "In the bathroom?" I asked skeptically. "He used the bathroom before he left," she said quickly. "He probably took it off to wash his hands. I'll text him to come get it." The explanation wasn't entirely implausible, but something felt off. "Why didn't you tell me he was coming over, or that he had returned my books?" "I didn't think it was a big deal," she said, avoiding my eyes. "I didn't want to upset you by mentioning him." I let it go, but my suspicions were awakened. I started paying closer attention to Heather's comings and goings, noticing how often she was out with friends, but came home wearing perfume with her lipstick freshly applied. Then came the moment of truth. Heather had asked to borrow my phone charger, and I went to her room to retrieve it. Her phone was on the bed screen, lit up with a new message notification. I had never been the type to snoop, but the name on the screen froze me in place: Nathan. The preview of the message was visible. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that red dress I like." My body moved on autopilot. I picked up her phone, she didn't have a passcode, and opened the messages. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. Weeks of messages between them, starting even before Nathan and I broke up. Flirtatious exchanges, plans to meet secretly, hearts and kissing emojis, and worse discussions about me. "She's so clueless," Heather had written. "She actually thinks you have a work dinner tonight." Nathan's response: "It's better this way. Once things settle down, we won't have to hide anymore." I was still staring at the phone, numb with shock, when Heather walked in. "What are you doing?" she demanded, snatching the phone from my hands. "How could you—" My voice was barely a whisper. "My sister. My own sister." Heather's expression cycled through shock, guilt, and finally defiance. "It just happened, Jen. We didn't plan it." When did it just happen? While he was still with me?" She hesitated just long enough to confirm my suspicion. "We tried to fight it, but there was just this connection between us. Something real." "Something real," I repeated, incredulous. "You've been sleeping with my boyfriend behind my back, and you want to talk about something real." "Ex-boyfriend," she corrected, and the callousness of that distinction broke something inside me. "He told me I wasn't wife material," I said, my voice breaking. "Was that your idea, or his?" Heather at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "He and I just connect better, Jen. It was never that serious between you two anyway. 2 years of my life wasn't serious. Planning a future together wasn't serious. He never saw a future with you," she said, and though her tone softened, the words cut deeper. "He was trying to find a way to end it for months. I just helped him see what he really wanted." I walked out of her room without another word. What was there to say? My boyfriend and my sister had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, and neither of them seemed to think they had done anything truly wrong. The next few weeks were tense in our family home. My parents sensed the conflict between us, but didn't know the cause. Heather told them we had had a fight about her borrowing my clothes without asking, a familiar sisterly dispute that they readily believed. I didn't correct them. What would be the point to force them to take sides between their daughters? I maintained a cold distance from Heather, speaking to her only when absolutely necessary. She made a few attempts at reconciliation. "We need to talk about this, Jen." But I shut them down. I needed space to process the double betrayal. What I didn't know then was that the worst was yet to come. Every year my family hosts a 4th of July BBQ in our backyard. It's a tradition that brings together extended family, neighbors, and friends for an afternoon of grilled food, lawn games, and fireworks. This year I almost didn't go. The thought of putting on a happy face and making small talk felt impossible. But my mother pleaded with me. "Everyone's been asking about you," she said. "Just come for a little while. It would mean so much to your father." So I went. I bought a new sundress. Yellow, bright, and cheerful, the opposite of how I felt. I got a haircut shorter and more sophisticated than my usual style. I was determined to show everyone, especially myself, that I was doing fine. Better than fine. When I arrived, the party was already in full swing. Red, white, and blue decorations hung from trees and fence posts. The smell of burgers and hot dogs filled the air. Children chased each other across the lawn while adults clustered in groups, cold drinks in hand. And there by the grill with my father was Nathan. My steps faltered. What was he doing here? After everything my parents had invited him, I looked around wildly and spotted my mother. I marched over to her, fury building with each step. "Why is he here?" I demanded without preamble. My mother had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Your father invited him. You know how fond he is of Nathan. And with everything going on—" "What's going on?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Before she could answer, I felt a hand on my arm. It was my cousin Tara. "There you are," she exclaimed. "I've been looking for you. You disappeared off social media for weeks, and Aunt Linda said you weren't feeling well. Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Just needed a break from the digital world. I'm fine now." Tara glanced over at Nathan, then back at me. "So you're okay with all this?" she asked, gesturing vaguely. "All what?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. Tara's eyes widened. "Oh God, you don't know. I assumed." She trailed off, looking mortified. "Know what, Tara?" My voice was sharper than I intended. "About Nathan and Heather," she whispered. "They've been dating. Everyone knows." The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. Everyone knew. Everyone except me knew that my sister and ex-boyfriend were officially together. I looked around the gathering with new eyes, noticing the furtive glances, the whispers behind hands. They all knew, and they had all chosen to keep me in the dark. I spotted Heather then emerging from the house carrying a tray of condiments. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled in loose waves. She looked beautiful, and the sight of her made me physically ill. For the next hour, I moved through the party like a ghost. I accepted a plate of food I couldn't eat. I made small talk I wouldn't remember later. I avoided Heather and Nathan as much as possible in the confined space of our backyard. I noticed Nathan seemed nervous, checking his pocket repeatedly, consulting his watch. Heather, too, seemed on edge, her laugh too loud, her gestures too animated. Something was off, but in my emotional state, I couldn't pinpoint what. Then it happened. As the afternoon turned to early evening and the sky began to darken in preparation for fireworks, Nathan clinked his fork against his beer bottle. The sound cut through the chatter, and the crowd gradually fell silent. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. My father stepped forward, beaming, and clapped Nathan on the shoulder. An endorsement. A blessing. Nathan moved to the center of the patio, and Heather stepped forward to join him. They stood together, facing the gathered crowd. My stomach churned with dread. "Some of you already know that Heather and I have been seeing each other," Nathan began. "What started as friendship grew into something more, something unexpected but wonderful." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eyes darted to me, then quickly away. I've been fortunate enough to know the Williams family for several years now, Nathan continued. They've welcomed me, included me, made me feel like one of their own. And through that experience, I've come to understand what I truly want in a life partner. He turned to Heather, taking her hands in his. Someone who shares my ambitions, who understands my world, who complements my strengths and challenges my weaknesses. Each word was a deliberate echo of what he had said to me that night at Bellini's. Not wife material, not ambitious enough, doesn't fit my future plans. He was throwing my inadequacies in my face in front of everyone who mattered to me. And then he was reaching into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box, dropping to one knee on the patio stones. Heather Williams, he said, opening the box to reveal a diamond that caught the setting sun and threw rainbows across the stunned faces of the crowd. Will you marry me? Time seemed to stop. I was aware of every detail. The slight tremor in Nathan's hand, the tears welling in Heather's eyes, my father's proud smile, my mother's conflicted expression. And I was aware of every face in the crowd turning to gauge my reaction, to witness my humiliation. Heather's yes seemed to come from far away, followed by applause that sounded like static in my ears. She extended her left hand, and Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger. A princess-cut diamond in a platinum setting, exactly the style I had once shown him in a magazine. As they embraced, Heather's eyes met mine over Nathan's shoulder. There was something in her expression, a mixture of apology and triumph that made my blood boil. She had won. She had taken everything. My boyfriend, my family's support, my dignity, and she wasn't even sorry. Relatives began to move forward to congratulate the happy couple, carefully avoiding eye contact with me. My Aunt Linda approached me, squeezing my arm. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she whispered. I wasn't. I was as far from okay as a person could be. But I straightened my spine, blinked back my tears, and nodded. "I'm fine," I lied. "If you'll excuse me, I need some air." I made my way through the crowd, past the whispers and stares, past my mother's attempt to reach for me, past my father, who was enthusiastically shaking Nathan's hand. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away without looking back. I had no destination in mind. I just drove, tears blurring my vision, until I found myself outside Zoe's apartment building. My best friend, the one person who had never liked Nathan, who had warned me about him from the beginning. I needed her now more than ever. I sat in Zoe's living room, wrapped in a blanket despite the summer heat, clutching a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. I had told her everything. The breakup, the affair with Heather, the public proposal at the family BBQ. "That absolute bastard," Zoe fumed, pacing back and forth. "And your sister? How could she do this to you?" I shook my head numbly. "I don't know. I keep trying to understand, but I can't." "There's nothing to understand," Zoe insisted. "They're both awful, selfish people who don't deserve your tears." She sat beside me on the couch, taking the cold mug from my hands and setting it on the coffee table. "I never liked him, you know. Right from the start, there was something off about him. Too polished, too perfect, like he was playing a role." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, though I knew the answer. I wouldn't have listened. I had been too besotted, too convinced that I had found my happily ever after. "I tried in my way," Zoe said gently. "Remember when I asked if you were sure about him after he criticized your apartment? Or when I suggested maybe you were moving too fast? You were so happy, Gent. I didn't want to be the friend who rained on your parade without concrete evidence." She was right, of course. I had been willfully blind to Nathan's flaws, making excuses for his behavior, reinterpreting his criticisms as constructive suggestions. I had molded myself to fit what I thought he wanted, losing pieces of myself along the way. "What am I going to do now?" I whispered, more to myself than to Zoe. "How can I face my family again? How can I ever look Heather in the eye?" "You don't have to decide that tonight," Zoe assured me. "You can stay here as long as you need to. The guest room is yours." That night I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through old photos on my phone, reading old text messages from Nathan, looking for clues I had missed. Had there been signs of his attraction to Heather? Had there been hints that he was preparing to leave me? The evidence was there in hindsight. The increasing frequency of Heather's inclusion in our plans, Nathan's growing criticism of my choices, the secretive text messages. As dawn broke, I came to a realization. The problem wasn't that I wasn't wife material. The problem was that I had allowed Nathan's assessment of my worth to become my own. I had accepted his judgment without question, internalizing the idea that I was somehow deficient. But what if he was wrong? What if being emotional wasn't a weakness but a strength? What if my contentment with teaching, with making a difference in children's lives, was more valuable than climbing a corporate ladder? What if I was exactly who I was supposed to be, and he was the one who couldn't see my worth? This revelation didn't immediately heal the pain of betrayal, but it gave me something I desperately needed, a glimmer of self-respect amidst the wreckage of my confidence. Over the next few days, I made some difficult decisions. I called my parents and explained that I needed space from the family for a while. My mother cried, my father protested, but ultimately they accepted my choice. "We still love you, Genevieve," my mother said before hanging up, "and we're here when you're ready." I took a leave of absence from school, arranged for a long-term substitute to cover my class for the remainder of the term. I moved my essential belongings into Zoe's spare room. I set boundaries. No contact with Heather, limited contact with my parents. A complete digital detox from social media where I might encounter news of the engagement. Instead, I focused on rebuilding myself. I started jogging in the morning, something I had always wanted to try, but Nathan had discouraged. "You're not really the athletic type, Jen." I joined a book club, rediscovering my love for reading that had taken a back seat during my relationship. I volunteered at an animal shelter, finding comfort in the uncomplicated affection of the cats and dogs. Slowly, painfully, I began to heal. Not completely, not all at once, but in small increments. Some days were better than others. Some nights, I still cried myself to sleep. But gradually, I started to recognize myself again in the mirror. Not just my face, but the spark in my eyes that had dimmed during my time with Nathan. 3 months passed this way. Fall arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the start of a new school year. I returned to teaching, finding joy in my students' enthusiasm. I had limited contact with my family, occasional phone calls with my mother, a brief coffee with my father. They were careful not to mention Heather or Nathan, and I was careful not to ask. Then came the day that changed everything again. It was a Saturday afternoon in October, and I was grading papers at a small cafe downtown when someone approached my table. I looked up to see a woman I vaguely recognized but couldn't immediately place. "Genevieve Williams?" she asked tentatively. I nodded, still trying to remember where I knew her from. "I'm Rachel Cohen," she said. "I don't know if you remember me. We met briefly at a charity event last year. I was with Nathan Harrington." The name triggered an immediate recollection. Rachel, the ex-girlfriend before me, the successful one who ran her own business, whom Nathan had occasionally mentioned with a hint of lingering admiration. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Would you like to join me?" Rachel sat fidgeting with the strap of her designer handbag. "I heard about what happened," she said without preamble. "With Nathan and your sister. It's all over the Boston social circle." I winced. The thought of being gossip fodder was mortifying. "It's old news now," I said, trying to sound indifferent. Rachel leaned forward. "That's just it. It's not. Not to me, anyway. When I heard the story, it was like listening to my own history repeating itself." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "Nathan did something similar to me," she explained. "Not with a sister, I'm an only child, but with my cousin. They didn't get engaged, but they dated for a while after he and I broke up." My mind raced to process this information. "He told you weren't wife material too?" I asked, hardly believing the coincidence. Rachel's eyes widened. Those exact words. "You're great, Rachel, but you're not wife material." Said I was too focused on my business, that I didn't have the right social graces for the circles he moved in. We spent the next hour comparing notes. The similarities in our experiences were uncanny. The whirlwind romance, the gradual introduction of criticism, the sudden breakup followed by him dating someone close to us. It was as if Nathan had a playbook he followed. "There's something else you should know," Rachel said as we finished our second round of coffees. "Something I found out after he started dating my cousin Jessica." She lowered her voice. "Nathan has a gambling problem. A serious one. He's in debt to some dangerous people. That's why he targets women from wealthy families. He needs access to money." I scoffed instinctively. "Nathan, he's an investment banker. He makes more money than most people dream of." Rachel shook her head. "That's the image he projects. But the reality is different. He lost his job at Morgan Stanley 2 years ago after some irregularities were found in his accounts. He's been working at a much smaller firm since then, making a fraction of what he used to." The timeline didn't make sense. But when I met him 3 years ago, he was working at Gartner Preston. He took me to their holiday party. "As someone's guest, probably," Rachel suggested. "Look, I'm not telling you this to upset you further. I'm telling you because I think your sister might be in danger, financial danger at least." "Why would Nathan target Heather through me?" I asked, still skeptical. "My family isn't wealthy." Rachel looked surprised. "Your grandmother's estate. It was in the business section of the Globe when she passed. Williams Technology Holdings sold for millions. My grandmother had indeed left Heather and me each a substantial inheritance held in trust until we turned 30 or got married, whichever came first. Heather was 24. With a marriage to Nathan, she would gain access to over $2 million. The pieces started to fall into place. Nathan's sudden interest in Heather, the rushed engagement, his careful cultivation of my father's approval. It wasn't about love or connection. It was about money. "I need proof," I said, my mind already racing ahead. "Something concrete I can show Heather." Rachel hesitated. "I have some documentation, bank statements showing large transfers from my accounts to his evidence of loans taken out in my name without my knowledge. I found it all after we broke up. It's why I ended things with him completely." She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. "Call me if you want to see it. But be careful, Genevieve. Nathan can be vindictive when cornered." After Rachel left, I sat at the cafe table for a long time, turning her card over in my fingers. Could she be telling the truth? Or was this a case of a scorned ex trying to stir up trouble? I needed to find out for myself. If Nathan was trying to scam my sister, I had to stop him. Despite everything, I couldn't let Heather be victimized. And if Rachel was wrong, I would have wasted some time, but nothing more. That evening, I began my investigation. I reached out to mutual acquaintances from Nathan's professional circle, asking casual questions about his career trajectory. I searched online for news articles about Morgan Stanley during the period Rachel had mentioned. I even called an old college friend who worked in finance, asking hypothetical questions about investment banking careers and red flags. The picture that emerged confirmed Rachel's claims. Nathan had indeed been let go from Morgan Stanley under a cloud of suspicion. His current firm was struggling, not prestigious. His lifestyle, the expensive apartment, the luxury car, the designer clothes, was funded by debt, not income. I met with Rachel again and she shared her documentation. Bank statements showing withdrawals she hadn't authorized. Loan applications with her forged signature. Credit card statements with charges for gambling websites and casinos in Atlantic City. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. My cousin Tara, who worked at a law firm specializing in estate law, called me out of the blue. "Jen, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice tense. "I probably shouldn't be sharing this, but I can't keep quiet. One of our paralegals is friends with someone at Boston Trust. She mentioned that there's been an inquiry about liquidating a trust fund for a Williams family member with paperwork for a marriage certificate that hasn't happened yet." "Heather's trust fund." I said, my suspicions confirmed. "Yes." The request was flagged as unusual because it included projected expenses that would drain the entire trust within months. The bank is requesting a meeting with both parties before proceeding. I thanked Tara for the information, my resolve hardening. I had the evidence I needed. Now I had to decide what to do with it. The decision came faster than I expected. That evening, my mother called to invite me to a small gathering at their house the following weekend. Just family, she assured me. And Nathan, of course. It's an engagement celebration for Heather. I know it's difficult, but it would mean so much if you could be there, just for a little while. An engagement party. The perfect opportunity to expose Nathan for what he was. But I needed to be smart about it. This wasn't about revenge, though I couldn't deny the appeal of that aspect. This was about protecting my sister from a predator. I accepted the invitation, ignoring my mother's surprised delight. "I'll be there," I promised. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Then I called Zoe and Rachel. I needed allies, and I needed a plan. The engagement party was an intimate affair, just family and close friends gathered in my parents' living room, which had been transformed with flowers, candles, and champagne flutes. My mother had gone all out, perhaps trying to compensate for the tension that still lingered in our family. I arrived early, dressed in a simple black dress that projected confidence and maturity. I carried a small folder tucked into my purse, the evidence I had gathered with Rachel's help. Zoe accompanied me for moral support, squeezing my hand as we walked through the door. My mother embraced me tentatively, as if afraid I might shatter. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "It means everything." My father was more reserved, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "You look well," he offered, which was his version of an emotional declaration. Heather and Nathan arrived soon after making an entrance as the guests of honor. Heather looked beautiful but nervous, fidgeting with her engagement ring. Nathan was his usual charming self, working the room with practiced ease, but I noticed the tension around his eyes, the way he kept Heather close to him at all times. When he saw me, he faltered momentarily before recovering his composure. "Genevieve," he acknowledged with a nod. "I'm glad you could make it." "I wouldn't miss my only sister's engagement party," I replied, my voice sweet with hidden venom. Throughout the early part of the evening, I bided my time. I sipped champagne, just one glass. I needed a clear head, made small talk with relatives, and watched Nathan carefully. He kept glancing at me, clearly unsettled by my presence and unexpected composure. After dinner, my father rose to offer a toast to the happy couple. As he spoke about love and family and new beginnings, I caught Zoe's eye across the room. She gave me a subtle nod. It was time. When the applause for my father's toast died down, I stood and raised my glass. "I'd like to say a few words if I may," I announced. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from curious to apprehensive. Nathan's face drained of color. "First, I want to congratulate my sister." I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Heather, you've always known what you wanted and gone after it with determination. That's a quality I've always admired about you." Heather shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure where I was going with this. "And Nathan?" I continued, turning to him. "What can I say about Nathan? He's certainly a man who knows what he wants, too. A man with very specific requirements for a wife." I set down my champagne glass and reached for my purse, extracting the folder. "In fact, Nathan is so specific about what he wants that he's used the exact same line on multiple women when breaking up with them. 'You're great, but you're not wife material.' Isn't that right, Nathan?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "Genevieve, I don't think this is appropriate." "No, then perhaps we should discuss what is appropriate. Is it appropriate to target women with access to trust funds to pay off gambling debts? Is it appropriate to forge loan documents in someone else's name? Is it appropriate to be planning to drain my sister's inheritance before you're even married?" Gasps echoed around the room. Heather stared at me, then at Nathan, her face a mask of confusion. "What is she talking about, Nathan?" she asked. Instead of answering her, Nathan turned on me. "You're making ridiculous accusations because you're jealous. You can't stand that I chose Heather over you." I opened the folder and began distributing the documents I'd collected. Bank statements, loan applications, credit reports, news clippings about his dismissal from Morgan Stanley, statements from other women he had targeted. "These aren't accusations," I said calmly. "These are facts. Nathan was fired from Morgan Stanley for financial irregularities. He has over $300,000 in gambling debts. He has a pattern of dating women with money, then finding ways to access their funds. Ask Rachel Cohen. Ask Jessica Cohen. Ask Melissa Donahue. They'll all tell you the same story." Nathan lunged for the papers, but my father stepped between us. "Is this true?" he demanded, scanning the documents in his hand. "Of course not," Nathan scoffed, but his confidence was cracking. "She's making this up. She's unstable emotional. That's why things didn't work out between us." I faced Nathan directly. "You said I wasn't wife material. You were right. I'm too honest, too caring, and too smart to be your wife. I would have seen through you eventually, so you traded up to someone you thought would be easier to manipulate. You miscalculated." Heather had been silent, reading through the papers with growing horror. Now she looked up, tears in her eyes. "Nathan, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't target me for my money." Nathan's expression cycled through several emotions: anger, calculation, and finally a desperate attempt at damage control. "Baby, don't listen to her. She's trying to drive us apart. Yes, I've had some financial setbacks, but that has nothing to do with us. I love you." "Then explain this," Heather said, holding up a loan application with her forged signature, something I hadn't even known about but Rachel had discovered through her contacts at the bank. "I never signed this. I never authorized a loan for $50,000. Nathan's face hardened. "You know what? This isn't worth it. Keep your money. Keep your dysfunctional family. I'm out of here." He stormed toward the door, but my father blocked his path. "I think you need to stay and answer some questions, son. Like whether we should be involving the police." Nathan looked around the room, taking in the hostile faces, the damning evidence, the complete collapse of his scheme. Whatever he saw must have convinced him that retreat was his best option. "Fine," he spat. "But you haven't heard the last of this. Any of you." He pushed past my father and out the door, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Heather sank onto the sofa, still clutching the loan document, tears streaming down her face. I hesitated, unsure if my presence would be welcome, but she looked up at me with such raw pain that I moved to sit beside her without thinking. "I'm so sorry, Jen," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know about any of it." "You didn't know he was using you for money," I acknowledged. "But you did know he was my boyfriend when you started seeing him." Heather nodded miserably. "I was jealous of you. You always seemed to have everything figured out. Your career, your relationship. Nathan made me feel special, chosen. He told me things weren't working with you, that you were growing apart. I wanted to believe him. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start." The party broke up quickly after that, guests making awkward excuses to leave. My parents looked shell-shocked, struggling to process everything that had happened. As the last guest departed, my father approached me. "You did a brave thing tonight," he said gruffly. "I should have seen through him. I should have protected both my daughters better." "We're adults, Dad," I reminded him. "We make our own choices." "Still," he insisted, "I'm proud of you, Genevieve, and I'm sorry I didn't appreciate you more." My mother hugged me tightly. "Stay tonight," she pleaded. "Stay home. We've missed you so much." I agreed, more exhausted than I had realized. As I headed up to my old bedroom, Heather caught me in the hallway. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, twisting the engagement ring off her finger. "What I did was unforgivable, but I want you to know I'm going to try to make it up to you somehow, for the rest of my life if that's what it takes." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Behind the makeup and sophisticated clothes Nathan had encouraged, I could see the little girl who had followed me around when we were children, who had cried when I left for college, who had always been a little bit in my shadow. "It's going to take time," I told her honestly. "A lot of time. But we're sisters. That means something." Heather nodded, tears spilling over again. "It means everything," she whispered. The months that followed were a time of healing and rebuilding. Heather filed a police report about the forged loan documents, but Nathan had disappeared, likely moving on to his next target in another city. My family went through counseling together, learning to communicate better and address the underlying issues that had made us vulnerable to someone like Nathan. Heather and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. There were difficult conversations, tears, and setbacks, but there was also laughter, shared memories, and a new appreciation for each other. She enrolled in a financial literacy course and volunteered at a gambling addiction support center, turning her painful experience into something constructive. My parents became more balanced in their attention and expectations for both daughters. My father in particular made an effort to show me that he valued my career and choices just as much as he had once valued Nathan's superficial success. As for me, I continued to rediscover who I was without Nathan's influence. I advanced in my teaching career, taking on leadership roles that I had previously avoided because Nathan had convinced me I wasn't suited for them. I traveled solo to places I'd always wanted to visit. I dated casually, taking my time, not rushing into anything serious. 6 months after the engagement party, I was helping my fourth graders with a science project when the classroom door opened and the principal ushered in a new student and his father. "Ms. Williams, this is Jackson Cooper and his father Daniel. Jackson will be joining your class," she announced. Daniel Cooper was tall, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. As he shook my hand, there was none of Nathan's calculated charm, just warm sincerity. "It's nice to meet you," he said. "Jackson can't stop talking about being in your class since we toured the school last week." I smiled at Jackson, then back at his father. "We're happy to have him. We're building solar system models this week. Perfect timing to join us." Later, after helping Jackson settle in, Daniel approached my desk. "I was wondering," he said, a touch of nervousness in his voice that was oddly endearing, "if you might have time for coffee sometime to discuss Jackson's transition to the school, of course." I found myself saying yes before I had fully considered the question. There was something about him that felt right, uncomplicated, genuine. Coffee led to dinner. Dinner led to more dinners. Daniel was a widower, raising Jackson alone, working as an architect, living a life built on honesty and simple pleasures. He listened when I talked about my interests. He never made me feel less than. He valued the very qualities that Nathan had criticized: my emotional nature, my dedication to teaching, my contentment with a life that wasn't defined by status or ambition. One evening, as we walked along the Boston Harbor after dinner, Daniel turned to me. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Of course," I replied, bracing myself slightly out of habit. "You're the most wife-material woman I've ever met," he said, then immediately blushed. "I'm sorry that came out wrong. I just mean, you're kind and smart and caring. You're exactly the type of person someone should want to build a life with." I burst out laughing, then had to explain my reaction when he looked confused. I told him about Nathan, about not being wife material, about all of it. To my surprise, sharing the story didn't hurt anymore. It felt like talking about a lesson learned, a bullet dodged. "He was an idiot," Daniel declared when I finished. "But I'm selfishly glad he was, because otherwise you might not be here with me now." 6 months later, when Daniel proposed, there was no grand gesture, no audience, no calculated timing. Just the two of us in his kitchen on a Sunday morning, Jackson away at a sleepover. "I love you," he said simply. "You're the best person I know. Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation. At our wedding the following spring, Heather was my maid of honor. She had met someone too, a kind, straightforward man who worked as a high school coach and looked at her like she hung the moon. As we posed for family photos, I caught my sister's eye. "Are you happy?" I asked her quietly. "I am," she said. "But more importantly, I'm honest now. With myself, with everyone. That's because of you, Jen. You showed me what courage looks like." I smiled, squeezing her hand. We both learned the hard way what makes someone wife material. It's not about fitting someone else's mold. It's about being authentic, being worthy of trust, being brave enough to stand up for yourself and the people you love. Looking back on the whole experience now, I realize that Nathan's cruel assessment was actually a gift in disguise. It forced me to question not just his values, but my own. It led me to discover strengths I didn't know I possessed. And ultimately, it guided me to a life more authentic and fulfilling than the one I thought I wanted. Sometimes the most painful rejections lead us exactly where we need to be. So if you're facing heartbreak or betrayal right now, know this: you are enough exactly as you are. The right people will value what makes you uniquely you, and sometimes finding your voice and standing up for yourself can be the most powerful move of all. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who underestimated you, or have you experienced betrayal from someone close to you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this video resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they are absolutely enough just as they are. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see your value.